Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Josh McCrowell, the game designer of Any Nominated His Majesty the Worm, a tabletop role-playing game designed for dungeon crawling. His Majesty the Worm is a new-school game with old-school sensibilities, a classic megadungeon experience given fresh life through a focus on the mundanities and small moments of daily life inside the dungeon. The Game Master is given tools to create a megadungeon called the Underworld, and the players create adventures to explore said Underworld in pursuit of their own personal quests. Tarot cards are used as a randomizing element for the majority of the game mechanics within the system, from tests of fate to combat to designing and maintaining the dungeon itself. It was an absolute delight to interview Josh about his work on His Majesty the Worm and his thoughts on game design. As I say in the interview, I find the concept of designing a mega dungeon overwhelming, but His Majesty the Worm makes dungeon delving sound really fun and unpredictable. I really like how the tarot card mechanic fits so well within each of the 4 phases of Crawl, Challenge, Camp and City, and how it makes combat exciting and engaging for everyone. It really speeds it up. His Majesty the Worm has been nominated in this year's Any for both Best Rules and Best Game categories, so fingers crossed for it. You can find out more information about His Majesty the Worm and check out Josh's latest work over on His Majesty the Worm's website. That's www.hismajestytheworm.games. I'll put a link to that and all the relevant things in this episode show notes. So we're going to start off really nice and simply. I would love for you, my wonderful guest, to tell us who you are and what do you do, my friend?
Hi, my name is Josh McCrowell. I'm nothing but an up-jumped blogger. I also have written a game that came out 1 year ago yesterday called His Majesty the Worm, and I'm the current editor-in-chief of Knock Magazine. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Thank you, Josh. It's lovely to have you. Congratulations on your Any nomination for His Majesty the Worm. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's somewhat trite or hackneyed or expected, but just to be nominated is an enormous honor. So very, very, very tickled.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, what is Knock Magazine? If they've been living under a rock, what is Knock Magazine? Just gives a little too long didn't read in that sense.
Yes, it's the funny thing about RPGs is that it's a large house with many rooms and rambling suites and abandoned sections and weird basements. So, you can be in the RPG house and be totally ignorant of the vast architectures around you. So, if you are not in my specific niche, you might not have heard of Knock. Knock Magazine is a magazine put out by a company called the Merry Mushmen. We just kickstarted, and backers should be getting their 5th issue, soon. Knock Magazine sort of is in the OSR space, and it a lot of the OSR space is kind of like has built its play style and its culture through very ephemeral foundational texts. And it's almost like a mystery religion. And if you, to get it, you have to have read all this theory that kind of like lives on the blogosphere. And Knock's mission, with some heavy scare quotes around that, is to collect those foundational texts that have been really important for the scene and have launched 1,000 ships and various games and products, and bundle them up, make them easy to read, make them easy to keep, and protect them from internet rot. And also just be like a really wonderful place of innovation and people having fun in the RPG space. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I was a big fan for years before I happened to get involved. So another thing where it's just like kind of like humbling to be around so many like cool people. So Knock Magazine, check it out. It's probably my favorite thing.
Amazing. And so, yeah, let's go into that sort of first, the awkward sort of question of like, what's your origin story? Were you, again, you said you're a jumpstart blogger, which is hilarious. I love that. I hope you have that on your little cards when you hand them out now. But how did you get into TTRPGs in general then? And was it more like, again, playing, then GMing, and then writing about stuff? Or was it a combination of all three at the same time?
When I was growing up, my parents read to me. And the last book my dad read to me as I was on this cusp of manhood was The Lord of the Rings. I was 12. And it made me go from the juvenile section to the adult section of the library. I was like, I want more books like this. And I wandered over there and I picked up big books and started reading. I also started reading the History of Middle-earth series by Christopher Tolkien, which is impenetrable to a 12-year-old, but such is like that obsession that you get when you're that age. And because I was talking about it, my friends let me in on a secret that they played Dungeons and Dragons. Now, when I was 12, the Satanic Panic was going on in America, and we were all rural Christian kids. And I was like, oh my God, that devil cult game? And they were like, no, it's not like that. So we played secretly. And, the text that we had available to us, because it was very clandestine, were these Xeroxed pages from several different D&D books and somebody's Shadowrun book and, somebody's Ars Magica book. So I had no total complete one book to play and read from. It was all these kind of secret,
sort of piecemeal
yes.
Poshmarks, yeah.
So, from the very start, we had to make up a lot of the rules. And so ever since then, I very much got in the habit from the first time I started playing of interacting with the rules and understanding that an RPG is sort of a singular medium that allows you to participate more fully as an author and a creator. And because I had that in my head, I've just always been making little games or adjustments to games or hacks of games. And I've done that, all my life. And His Majesty the Worm was probably the first time that I thought, okay, well, my table, my gaming group of 7 or 8 weirdos have always been very indulgent with me. But what does it take to get somebody else to be able to run the game the way that we run it, or to play the games that I'm making? And that is a huge leap, right? Explaining a game to somebody and playing it with them you can do that with a handful of notes. And apparently it took me 400 pages to explain.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's quite again, all good, worthwhile pages. But when I opened it, I was like, thank goodness we rescheduled our interview because I was not going to read that in the weekend. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge undertaking, I feel, to get that leap, but I've always been making games and interacting with games that way.
I guess obviously if you say these sort of initial text of Lord of the Rings, which I know is usually the one for a lot of people getting into D&D, so would you say that fantasy is the genre that you love the most? Again, I know His Majesty the Worm is fantasy specific, or do you like lots of different systems, because you say you've been making lots of different games, stuff is it fantasy is the one that's usually at the top of the list when you're creating games?
My love of Tolkien is fairly lifelong. I studied it academically when I was in college, when I thought I was going to be an academic, before I realized that I needed insurance for bones and stuff. And I have thought a lot about the fantastic, especially the early fantastic as a genre. The older I get, the less interested I am in genre fantasy. Some of my favorite books for real are fantasy. Ursula Le Guin is one of my other favorite authors. Yeah. I quite like the Game of Thrones series. I also very much like The Once and Future King, T.H. White. But sort of the older I get, the less stomach I have for generic fantasy. And so I read very little of it. Sometimes people turn me on to something and I'm like, oh, wow, that actually worked out. But I read or consume fantastic media less and less and less as I get older. But when I'm playing my role-playing games, yeah, I love fantasy, and I like writing in the fantastic genre. But I play all sorts of games and go kind of wander all over the map there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always just interesting because obviously with the big Dungeons and Dragons, it's always all over us all the time. It's always find it interesting when we ask people like, so is it fantasy? And people go, oh no, or not so much. But obviously they are sort of bound to one system that they know. But obviously with systems such as His Majesty the Worm, is you still get that, but also these other subgenres. And one thing I did want to pick on before we sort of dive into His Majesty the Worm is that firstly, thank you so much for putting what your inspirations are in the book. Sometimes they don't have that. I'm like, well, where did you get inspiration from? But I'm curious because obviously you mentioned a lot of like fiction books there, but a lot of the inspirations for His Majesty the Worm were comic books.
That's right.
And I just thought that was really interesting because one of them, obviously, well, I know it as Delicious in Dungeon, but Dungeon Messy. I guess the inspiration for these comic books obviously helped with that. But what moved you to wanting to create this game? 400 pages of it. Like, what was it? What this is the novel, right? This is the debut novel. What put you to put pen to paper, I guess?
Many of my main influences were comic books, and I think I asked the question in the text itself, like and said sort of like I don't know why. I don't know why that the comic books were a big influence. I think that comic books, more than novels, I think they share more dream sequence DNA with role-playing games than novels do. As you move from panel to panel, and as your eye can like kind of go both forward and backwards over the panels, I feel as if that's sort of the way that role-playing games also somewhat move through time. You can sometimes like take a step back and you're like, okay, hold on, we kind of went down a hole, but like, let's reset the scene. When this happened 2 minutes ago, where were we? What were we doing? You can kind of go forward and backwards, and you can make these like big jumps through space where there's like a framing panel at the top. The GM describes the situation, and then you kind of like get into it, and it goes in dialogue between these characters. I don't know. I think there's a lot of similarity between the way that storytelling works in comics and the way that storytelling works in RPGs. And I was mostly just like inspired by these particular comics when at the time that I first put pen to paper. Why I wanted to put pen to paper was just, what does it take to get somebody else besides myself to learn about this? And I was underemployed and had a lot of free time. So, I wrote the bulk of the game, kind of like in a 9-month stretch. And then the other 6-7 years were I had a more regular day job and had to like kind of make do on writing on Sundays. The most interesting thing to me, if you haven't heard this story, let me share it about the comic references. Is there was one particular webcomic that I very much liked at that time. It was called House of Ore. And the House of Ore was about it's fantasy dungeoneers, and in their society, like voting power is held by adventuring guilds. And so the conclave of the guilds, where all the guilds come together to vote, like to have a vote and participate in society, you have to be a member of the adventuring guild. I really liked that comic. I thought it was kind of like Dungeon Meshi, and I read it first in so much as it imagined the physicality and the practicality of like what it would be like to live in a fantastic world. What do you have in your pack? How does it feel to move through these fantastic spaces in a realistic way? It's very charming. But unfortunately, at the time that I hit publish, I'd been working on it so long, the web comic was defunct and the URL had expired. And you couldn't read it anymore. And I still put it in as inspiration. Because it was. I referenced it. I thought about it, and I was like, hey, I really liked this comic. Sorry, I'm putting it in here. You can't read it anymore. And when the book was published, somebody showed that little blurb to the writer of the webcomic, and they were like, well, hell, I'll just put it back up. And so now you can read it again.
Oh, amazing.
So I think that was fantastic. If I accomplished nothing else, I got one good webcomic.
You got your comic back online. You're like, yes, carry on. Very interesting what you said about like the narrative, because often like obviously when we're watching films, obviously we're seeing that one POC of the camera where the director wants us to look at, and the same with the book is that you can sort of imagine it, but once you're sort of reading through, unless you're rereading the same paragraph over and over again, you probably are going to get your one POV of what the writer wants you to do. So like comics, and I was thinking storyboarding in general. So again, same thing with visual, and I like that idea. Like you don't have with comic books, obviously it is that little bit of dialogue or sort of the over the top stuff, and then these visual images, and that's it to communicate whole concepts and stories. Yeah, I hadn't really considered that before. So I love that analogy you just did with the comics and graphic novels as to role-playing games, and being able to go back along that timeline and go, oh, at this time this was happening. And yeah, it feels very, as you said, when you're working out the same scene together, almost like a play, is that the audience will see where they're sat, their POV, but you as this, like Mercutio can see Benvolio in Romeo and Juliet. But yeah, interesting. No, I hadn't really thought about it like that. Let's talk about His Majesty the Worm then. So, for those people who have been living under a rock, what is His Majesty the Worm, and how does it stand out to other TTRPGs that are out there currently?
I've described it a couple ways, and I recently have settled on this. So I was very inspired by the OSR blogging scene in the aughts and like early, the aughts and the early teens. I had played a lot of games. I'd even published, I think I'd published some like Pathfinder stuff before, and just kind of like making stuff for RPGs. So I have some writer credits there. And oh man, the people that were creating stuff for the OSR were so inspirational. Everything was so weird, and the way they thought about games, I was like, I want to play like this. And the OSR. I know that I'm answering the question by going into this.
No, big, I love it. Don't worry, I'm here for it. Don't worry, we're all here for it.
You know, the OSR might be defined as like a style of play that focuses very highly on player agency and has the same subject matter and a nod to the origins of Dungeons and Dragons, the earliest editions of Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of like a false reclamation of the way things used to be, and it's utterly made up. This is not the way things used to be. That's like the big double think of the genre, but they're creating some of the coolest stuff out there. Mm-hmm. The attention to player agency and these sort of like core first principles, and they become these like little rote mantras that combat is a fail state, and the answer is not on your character sheet, and these sorts of these principles of the OSR. If you're going to ignore the fact that they came out of original D&D and made a game based on the principles but not the legacy of D&D, I think it might look like His Majesty the Worm. So His Majesty the Worm is built on this OSR philosophy, but it's not a retro clone. Mm-hmm. It is focused on fantasy dungeon crawling, which is where my heart lives, and it never graduates out of it. You never start domain play, and you never get a spell that, you know, allows you to instantly overcome dungeon challenges. Mm-hmm. And it focuses on the kind of realistic, mundane, interpersonal connections that happen in the dungeon. What you need to eat, how it feels to sleep. Do you share a bedroll with somebody? Do you share a tent with somebody? What do you do in the tent? How do you feel about your companions? Mm. And it one of the another like determiner that I chose for it is you use tarot cards instead of dice to resolve mechanical questions. So it's very much like it lives in this OSR space and is not an OSR game at all. So in some ways, like, I've really shot myself in the foot because like it's universally hated by everyone. It's really kind of like backed myself into a corner, but that is the pitch of the game.
I love that. And I think that's the unique thing. I think people who aren't au fait with OSR stuff is that, as you sort of mentioned, that there's no dice mechanics. It is purely tarot card for everything. And I want to commend you on that, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, is that it's so rare that tarot cards, for various reasons, are used solely as the main core mechanic rather than just like, oh, here's a flavor thing that the GM can do just to fill the dungeon, which is one thing I know we can do with that. But actually resolving, tests, tests of fate, what the actions in the camp are, what the actions in the city are, and doing it so smoothly that it doesn't feel like we're relearning. Like, it feels obvious. Maybe again, another compliment on honestly is that it's so obvious, but that's great because to get people on board in a game that doesn't use dice, where they're maybe like, well, I want to be good at something, where it feels like, obviously, Majesty the Worm, if it's like you're going into a dungeon, you're not going to be good. You're not going to use that spell to instantly overcome something. You're going to have to plan your way together and get out and do this cycle until you resolve whatever your deep mission is for your character. I just really like that. But also, whilst people might be like, well, it feels like then you're constantly like marking off resources, you have some really cool like role play prompts and the bond stuff as well that you do at camp. So you are connected to these people's characters as well. It's not just, like working things out. It's actually you are doing the role play element as well.
I would. So one, I don't think I've invented almost anything.
No, of course not. But
yeah, sure. It's an amalgamation of things that I'm interested in, and I kind of reject the parody or the line between that, like OSR and story games, or like there's like this I think very false idea. I drop in the word that like OSR gamers are like, I don't care about my character. Yeah. I'm just here to kick orcs and knock down doors and get treasure and get out. And if he dies, Bob 2 will take over. I also think that like these like story game principles are like living surreptitiously within the OSR community. Mm-hmm. Things where you do care about your relationships with people, and there's scene control mechanics and that are kind of like subtly, like, especially as like more as these games have taken off and been iterated on for 2 decades now. Mm-hmm. More and more of that like wall between having threads and bonds from story games have like made their way, like mushroom spores drifting through the dungeon and taking root in the damp cellar of the OSR. So I think that His Majesty the Worm is just kind of like pulling on that now pretty popular tradition of like pulling these like little threads over from other genres of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I guess, starters off, what are your favorite parts of the game? Like, I know I've seen you run it several actual plays online for it, and yeah, just to say as well, whilst everyone uses the players use the same deck, the tarot deck, whilst the GM uses the major arcana, you use the minor arcana, you can still play this online. You've got resources on the website to be like, there are various like VCTs that can do it as well, so it's not just an in-person game. But I guess, yeah, what was your favorite part to design when you sort of coming to it? Because I as you said, you wrote it in a nine month span, and obviously you had the playtesting stuff. What things surprised you whilst you were writing about it?
Something that I think is interesting about the game is its combat mechanics, which I call the challenge phase. In the challenge phase, as you mentioned, the players draw minor arcana, the GM draws the major arcana. In the challenge phase, things slow down, and we use another mechanical subsystem, just like D&D. And players draw hands of cards, and then they choose which cards they want to represent their initiative, and their initiative represents both how fast they move and how hard they are to hit. Mm. So the faster you move, the easier you are to hit. And the GM, sort of does the same. And then they take turns placing cards down and having turns, but everybody else at the table can also make moves on other people's turns if they have a card that matches the suit of the action they want to take. Mm. And the result of that is a couple things. One, play moves pretty fast. And I the amount of times you see on the back dust jacket, like, combat actually fast. And I think that is like 99% of dust jacket like text. Yeah. And I think 98% of them are wrong.
Yeah.
I think that once you get it, play moves pretty fast because players are slapping down cards and actions are resolving at the same time. Also, instead of like kind of kicking back and waiting for your turn, you are fairly engaged every turn, because there's something you might be able to do that round that you can take and kind of like interrupt and also participate. So you're not just waiting for your turn, you're listening to your other players' turns, and you're participating in their turns, and you're adding your cards to theirs.
Hey heroes, it's James, and One Shot is going to be at Gen Con 2025. And we've got events that you can book tickets to. On Friday at 10 a.m., we have the Ultimate RPG World Building panel with myself, Jeff, and John. On Friday at 11 a.m., we have a live play of Cosmic Century Nights with, again, myself, Jeff, John, and a special guest. Friday at 1 p.m., we have System Mastery Live. That's going to be with Jeff and John, and hey, guess what? Me, a special guest. Then Friday at 8 p.m., we have our RPG game show Netflix and Kill, where we match you up with monsters from various monster manuals. And Friday at 9 p.m., we have a live performance of Oh Captain, My Captain, starring again myself, Jeff and John, and Dylan Appelian. Saturday at 3 p.m., we have the Skyjacks live show. That's going to have me, Nathan Blades, and very likely Tyler Davis, and probably Johnny O'Mara, but not Liz Anderson. Then Saturday at 8:30 p.m., we have the Ultimate RPG Dungeon Meister Pub Trivia Show, where Jeff, John, and I are going to be doing RPG trivia with tons of prizes from our publishing catalogs. All of that is bookable through the Gen Con website. I am so excited to see all of you in 2025.
And it's also something that, sometimes RPG tactics usually mean, when you think about tactical play, usually means about positioning minis.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly can use minis, but it's assumed to be a theater of the mind. I play theater of the mind. And the tactics of this game are more strategies around the cards in your hand every round and how you're going to spend them to get the maximum effect that you can. And I've watched players go from, this is pretty confusing, I don't get it, this is kind of hard, this is different than what I'm used to, go to like masters and get really, really good at the game. So there's a skill at like mastering the combat in a way that I haven't seen in many of the games I've played, where sometimes combat comes down to like pre-game strategy of like character options and building, and then like at game luck. And here there's certainly luck because you don't know what cards you're going to get, but you also have a lot of strategy and tactics in how you deal with the hands that you're given. Sometimes it's a bad hand, and the best players still play really smart then. And it's kind of like Dark Souls in some ways, because I've watched people go from, hey, I don't know how to do this, to absolutely dominating the game because they get it. There's something clicks in their mind and they start thinking long term, many rounds, and comboing off each other's cards, which is huge. So that's always been really fun for me.
Yeah, like for me, when I was reading through it, it reminded me how I have got better. I'm still not great at Magic the Gathering, because once I understood that I have my own game that's happening and then there's 3 other people in my pod that's doing it, and then be like, oh, well, they've done that, I could do this, and making sure, like you said, like, do I use this now? I know obviously at the end of each round, if you've not used your card, then it goes away, but it's like, when do you use the thing? So I suddenly was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And so, yeah, I definitely saw that with the sort of the Magic the Gathering influence, I suggest, on that. But like, yeah, it's that once you understand, you can then make choices. And as you said, it's in the moment. So you don't feel like, oh, I'm just rubbish at this. It's like, oh, you just learn as you go. And yeah, presumably by like the second or third combat, you've understood how to go from it. Like you said, we have that always with RPGs, we have that first awkward, like, what we're going to do, but then it gets so much easier. I think, just to go back to your comments about that, the dust jacket of 99%, is quick combat. That's the thing that always puts me off games, is that I, as a GM and facilitator, I hate combat because I don't want to get it wrong, but it's dice rolling, it's extra math stuff. Here, it's so simplified and quick and exciting, and as you said, like, it engages the players because they have to be listening. They're not just going, cool, that's my turn, I turn off for 5 minutes and it's my turn again. Yeah, which is that instantly breaks all the emotion, because then, whereas here it's like, because it's so quick and like you said, the combo and people working together, which then bonds people to be like, right, these characters are important on top of it.
So this is going to sound like I'm making this up or like ragging on D&D unfairly, and I have played a lot of 5th ed D&D, and I'm not ragging on it, but a lot of the game was written in my head, or like the origins of the ideas. When I was just waiting for my turn, I would play with my post-college friends, and there were 7 or 8 of us, and we'd get once a month. It was fun. We had a blast. We'd make barbecue, and we'd all sit in a room and drink beer and fart, and inevitably the day of D&D would like focus on these big set piece battles. And when you have 7 or 8 of us, there's CR25 dragons flying around, you just wait a long time before your turn comes back. And I was sitting there like chewing on my pencil thinking like, how could everyone go at the same time? Or how could they take multiple moves every turn? And I was thinking about cards at that point. And then when I got to an office job that essentially turned off at noon on Monday, from noon to 5, I was like, okay, cool, I'll just write this up.
Yeah.
And that was the origin of those thoughts, just because I was having fun with my friends, but I also thought that there was an opportunity to make combat a little bit more fast and a little bit more chaotic too. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to sort of talk about was that, as you said, the sort of template for Majesty the Worm is that it's a big mega dungeon. The structure is the same. You go in, you do as much as you can before going like, let's go back, or we complete the thing. You go back to the city. You firstly, I know you've got a note of it in the book, but you give over 50% of the gold you have, which is so funny. I've had that happen to me, and again, I've gone, what? Oh. So yeah, you're coming back with these big portraits and says, oh well, these are mine. They're not. You can't take the money off me for that, which I thought was great. But then go through that upkeep and cycle and then go back into it. So the game is the same for everyone, and that's the basic overall storyline. But what I loved is, like, again, and I know this is how you lay it out in the book, is that every chapter you have that sort of like, here's the flow chart, here's the actions that you do in these particular phases with the 3 phases. But then you go into detail about it, and you mentioned, like, at the end of, I think it's the city phase, or the end of a general sort of session where you go, okay, what's your mission you'd like to do next? Yeah, it's the city phase, because then you're like getting the players involved with their own upkeep of like, how are we going to plan the next thing? And then also the GM go like, how do you prep? And what's interesting, because again, I say other RPGs where, it's like, oh, I've got to find 3 hours somewhere to plan all these big pieces. Whereas here, it's just like, well, we'll roll randomly, or you just think and just replace entries in the table of the major arcana, because that's what is going to affect your encounter, stuff like that. And I just thought that was just such a beautiful way to streamline a lot of prep, because I can imagine, again, mega dungeons to me feel very overwhelming, like fun to play in, but as a GM we're like, okay, I need to plan out everything, whereas you could just keep using the same table. And I know this sounds really, really obvious, I appreciate, but I just thought, because you put it in such simple terms of like, yeah, you've used these particular entries on these tables that you've created, switch them out for something else, so you're like, oh, it's actually less prep, really. And it just felt very simplistic in a good way, and not simplistic in a bad way, but like it just felt very streamlined.
Well, I've had a lot of interests over my career, so certainly maybe one day I will be in a different headspace. But today, I very much care about what I'm calling right-sized prep, and it's people can sort of sell you 2 different things. In one camp, and this is their preferences, and God bless, it's just not mine. There's one camp that has a very no prep, low prep, improv heavy strategy. And I am really glad it works for them. It neither works for me as a GM, and in the games that I've played as a player where I could kind of tell that they were doing it, I suspect that my ratio of being able to tell is pretty good. It didn't particularly work for me as a player either, because there's a sense of discovery in finding something that is written down in the player's big notebook. Yeah. And when they are flipping pages and they're like, aha, you found this, and you're like, yes, I found it, and you know that you can only find it if there's something there to find.
Right. Yes. You've not just made it up for the sake of, oh, they rolled a natural 20, there was nothing in this room beforehand, but now they've got a +1 die. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then there's this other side of the camp, and I've watched my friends do that, and God knows I've done this. I did this for years, where so I have a 2-hour game once a week. That means I have to spend 3 hours before that to make the session for that week. What did they do last time? Okay, cool. These things have changed. What are they going to do next time? Okay, cool. There's this monster running after them, and I'm staying just ahead of them, and I have to like put all this time towards getting the weekly game prepped. And I reject on both paradigms, both the weekly prep and the no prep. And my pitch is that, or the way that I make games, and this really works for me, is that when I'm interested in a new campaign, my brain is buzzing. If I can make a dungeon, if I can set up the dungeon while I have like this really focused, intense interest,
yes,
I can keep that going for years through very small amounts of maintenance. So a mega dungeon does seem like a big ask, but I think 2 things. One, it's just a series of discrete choices. And when you kind of itemize the choices, it becomes much less scary to do it yourself. You can come up with a dungeon in a couple afternoons of planning. And when your mind is going, that work is pretty fun and is kind of like an enjoyable experience for me. And then once you've made those choices, you don't have to do it twice because they're going to revisit those places and they'll change with time and based on the player's actions. And that's what you're were alluding to at the city phase. You update some stuff. And there's another thing, technique that I think is really important to remember here is that you're making stuff for your players and nobody else. And that means steal, baby, steal. There's so many good dungeons out there. And a mega dungeon is just 5 dungeons in a trench coat. So find 5 dungeons that you love and have been well reviewed and are by people that you're interested in. And, oh, cool. Now there's hallways connecting all 5 dungeons and they're under the city. Great. You just have a 5-year campaign just by like buying 5 books and like making some thoughtful connections between them. And that, again, just only takes a couple weekends. So I front load the prep so that it's when I'm interested in it. And then really you can have some really, really long-term campaigns through basic maintenance, not never. You want the characters' choices to be reflected and contents of room to like change in ways that make sense. But I do that maybe once every month, maybe twice every 3 months. And that's an hour of work. So I prep a lot at front and then I let the game kind of run itself. And there's an engine there that keeps it going in a way that works for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I used to be someone who worked in higher education and create course content. So it's the same sort of thing where it'll be a lot of upfront work, but then the maintenance should be minimal. And to get that across to people was very hard. Again, they'd have that passion at the beginning and then they'd be like, obviously falter towards the end. But like, well, if we do all this stuff now, we can streamline it to make it easier for everyone involved. So I agree. I love how it is just, again, it's to keep that passion alive so you don't burn out. You don't have to go, oh, God, I've got to prepare for this big old battle coming up. You don't know. There is a battle there somewhere on your table. If they pull it, it's going to happen now, but you've already prepped it because you've had that hyper-focus at the beginning, which I really, really love. I also really love like the character creation as well, like the kith and kin and the 4 paths and stuff like that. Again, tying in deeply to the tarot cards as well to give those dimensions as well. And and I wanted to sort of, I know obviously there's so many different lineages in the kith and kin. I really liked how humans, they could be connected to a house that you could make up, but with a motto as well. And I just quite enjoyed that idea that, you could use the motto to do something cool. And I just, all the little bits that weren't necessarily like, I guess I say role play rather than like, oh, you get a +2 because you're from this lineage or whatever. It's just like, this is just a part of the culture. And it's just a quite fun, unique thing that has to be, I say role play, you could just say it, but like I just thought that was really interesting.
To elaborate for people who haven't read the book, humans are from, and even if they're not nobles themselves, I'm not expecting that they are, but they're from these regions where a house reigns. So this is very Game of Thrones inspired for me because I do quite like those books. So imagine that you're a Northman in A Song of Ice and Fire, and overhead there's a dire wolf banner, and you've been grown up hearing the words winter is coming. And so when that's appropriate in game, when that's appropriate for your character to say, or when that sort of like grim resolution of, well, I'm preparing because I know that like a hard time is ahead, and like I'm setting up maybe a trap to like catch somebody like that you're baiting a trap for, and you're like, hey, can I get a bonus because winter is coming and like I'm prepping something? The GM says, yeah, take that bonus. So like your motto and your house crest are what you're getting your bonuses from as a human. And I think that makes humans interesting because I thought to myself, so many people are trying to think about, the fantasy conundrum. What are humans good at if elves are just like pointy-eared humans and dwarves are short humans and everyone's humans, but what do we do to make humans interesting? I think that humans are family oriented. I think they're clannish. I think they're great at fighting. I think they're the most warlike. I think that we are good at family and good at fighting, and that was my pitch to make because you can also call your motto aloud in battle and get a bonus when you do that. So and all everybody else from your house, when they hear you, get a bonus as well. So that's my pitch for what humans do.
Along with that, and along with all the sort of kith and kin folks, is that you have this erate idea, so that this is where your character amplifies their sort of platonic ideal of the kin, and that means you can get talents related to that. And again, I quite like it. You've already said it, that humans get their erate by getting married, doing clan stuff, like home stuff. And I just thought, yeah, it's not like you've vanquished someone or anything like that. Obviously, I know it depends on the kith and kin, but I just thought that I like that. Here's like how do I put it? Like almost like touch points where I'm going to role play towards this, or this beat will happen in the story. I'm going to go towards it, and if I achieve it, then I get an additional talent for it. But it's not a mechanical, you need to kill 5 people in this way and get X amount of XP.
I'm a big this is a controversial statement for reasons I don't entirely understand, but when you incentivize players to do things that you think the game are about, and I think that is a fundamental part of game design, and the blogs will be mad that I said that, but I think it's true. And I like having stories of romance. That's what I see in the fantasy fiction that I do like Game of Thrones, Arthurian stories, like Tolkien. Those characters got married, and by God, I want people to get married in their game, retire and have babies, and like bring out a new guy for a little while. So yeah, I have Arete is these like kind of like cultural touchstones, and as you're doing them for your different characters, and dwarves have different ones and elves have different ones, you're kind of like making a character that you want to retire at the hearth fire and play somebody else for a little while, which was also something that I wanted to incentivize, was because my players all have an inclination to want to make a lot of characters and pull them out. So I wanted to have these little cycles that allowed them to do that and recycle and enforced it. Like, cool, play your character to the hilt, have their story, and then cool, you can play the next 12 guys that you have like in your backlog.
I like that because, there's always, again, a stereotype, I would say, that people just hold on to their character and they have to have all these things. And that's, again, different play style, great for you. But I like the idea. And then, as I said, the opposite, where people go like, I have 5 backup characters. Can't wait till this guy pops off, But it's trying to make a balance between the meaningfulness of it. So that hold on lightly, like you don't know if your character will get back out of the dungeon, but what will happen is that, if they perish or they retire or whatever, it's meaningful. And the same with the camp actions as well. You have like a beautiful table, which is about like the campfire discussions, which, it's just like, okay, you've done all your, you're settling down for the night, you're having rations, you pull out, you pull out a card. Oh, okay. My favorite one is like, how many 3-year-olds could you fight at once? Great. What a great question. It's exactly like, if I go around to my friends for a barbecue or something like that, and I'd be like, there's always that one guy who's like, so, would you fight one horse-sized duck or many duck-sized horses? And you're like, well, I have to answer this question right now, even though it doesn't matter what the answer is, right? And obviously there are other more serious role-play questions there, but I just was like, heck yeah, I want to ask someone that at the next campfire, and have that conversation in character, and just fleshing out these characters so that, if they retire or whatever, you had a really cool conversation that you wouldn't have had otherwise,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the core of the game is about, is making these realistic human beats. I do a lot of camping, I do a lot of hiking, and I definitely feel that the way that me and my friends act at camping and hiking is like infused into the text, because things like Dungeon Meshi like got it right. Those people are sitting around their campfires having these discussions about their background and their history, and they're revealing like these little story beats towards each other. In Chilchuck, like they have conversations about their ages, and like a dwarf doesn't recognize that Chilchuck is an adult because he's small and he thinks he's a child, and he's like, no, I'm 23, and he's like, 23 is a child, because they have these differences. I wanted to get at that in these games, and I just wanted to put prompts, pauses, not that you had to linger on it over long, but if I never gave the opportunity, I think players would pass it by, because we passed it by in many of the games that I played. And I wanted to give these little breaths in the flow of the game to allow that kind of conversation. So it's really important to me. And I'm glad you got a kick out of it.
For me, it stands out as different to like, oh, we just plow on, it's X, Y, Z, the planning thing, which I know obviously is not what your game's about. But I just thought that was such an interesting, like, well, in the flow diagram, we have to have this discussion, and it's a part of the, it's part of the structure. And then, just, even if it's just like a one-word answer of one 3-year-old I will fight, or none, because you shouldn't be fighting 3-year-olds, then it's done, right? But I just thought, allowing players to have that moment to be like, what, because the thing is, any questions like that, you're like, well, what would it be? As well as obviously, like I said, the more role play moments. My penultimate question, it's sort of a two-parter question. So obviously it's been a long time coming, His Majesty the Worm. What would you say was the most difficult part of putting it together? What was like the most challenging obstacle? And then on the flip side, what's the most enjoyable thing that you got to be able to do during the sort of game design development of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something that caused a fair bit of angst for probably longer than it should have was that, this is my first printed game, and I did want to get it to print. That was important to me for just like my goals of like, hey, can I share this? Like part of that was like, can I hold this? And I was, and probably still am, just like practically very ignorant of the physicalities of what it takes to print a book. And the little that I have learned has made me impressed that books ever get printed, because there's so many mechanics of like industry that go into it, considerations of paperweight, the color of the images, where you print it, how you ship it, how you store it. The United States has a paper crisis. People who are printing in the United States or like shipping from the United States are frequently using printing services of this like in the UK and then shipping them over, even though shipping is so much internationally, just because the paper shortage makes paper so difficult to get, and that has not improved since I pressed print on this book because of the tariff situation. And people go into Kickstarters and they are mad all the time about every RPG Kickstarter, and I would like to tell them, do you know how many physical people, from like the felling of the trees to the creating of the wood pulp, that are like need to be involved to make that book? Like, it is really, really complicated. So it was difficult for me to find somebody to help with that. Eventually Exalted Funeral was able to action that, but I came to them with a complete book at that time, and I just held it out to them like, would you print this for me? So that was difficult, and continues to be difficult. Our second printing is en route, but still has taken a long time. And let's see. It was fun and continues to be fun to play and play test. My friends have been indulgent. They've been kind. They've volunteered their time and energies to give me feedback at many iterations, tried many different things out, read and reread texts for basic copy editing, and the support I received from them was and continue to, because we still play every Tuesday 7 to 9:30, so a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I appreciate that might not be the 7 or 8 people every time, or a different group of friends, but I like the idea that you like these 7 or 8 people. They're just like, all right, again we go into the dungeon. It's such a rarity that I don't think I have 7 people I can invite round to for my games, just because everyone's lives are so busy. So it's what a delight you get on that. So I can imagine that's exciting every Tuesday.
It's been going on so long that a friend of mine dropped out because he had his first child, and then came back because the child was a toddler. Like, it was going on so long that they could leave and then come back because the child grew up. So yeah.
Oh, well, Josh, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but I know we could talk about this for a long, long time. Where can we find you on the internet? Where can we get His Majesty the Worm? And is there any other projects you have in the zeitgeist that are coming out soon?
So you can find His Majesty the Worm at hismajestytheworm.games. If you are trying to get a physical edition, you can pre-order them. There's a link from that link. You can pre-order it from Exalted Funeral. My blog is riseupcomus.blogspot.com. As I said, I predominantly think of myself as a blogger. I update the blog frequently. the next major project that I'm working on Knox 6 with the next edition of the magazine. I'm also working on publishing a megadungeon for His Majesty the Worm. I just came out with a 30-room dungeon, somewhat smaller. The next dungeon will be 100 rooms, and that I hope will be out sometime early next year.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much, Josh. And best of luck with the NEs and stuff. I can imagine that's such an exciting thing as well. Like, it's out in the world, second printing and all that, and then NEs and stuff. So, yeah, fingers crossed for you, my friend. And, yeah, best of luck.
Thank you.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, just let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.
Hey heroes, it's James, and One Shot is going to be at Gen Con 2025. And we've got events that you can book tickets to. On Friday at 10 a.m., we have the Ultimate RPG World Building panel with myself, Jeff, and John. On Friday at 11 a.m., we have a live play of Cosmic Century Nights with, again, myself, Jeff, John, and a special guest. Friday at 1 p.m., we have System Mastery Live. That's going to be with Jeff and John, and hey, guess what? Me, a special guest. Then Friday at 8 p.m., we have our RPG game show Netflix and Kill, where we match you up with monsters from various monster manuals. And Friday at 9 p.m., we have a live performance of Oh Captain, My Captain, starring again myself, Jeff and John, and Dylan Appelian. Saturday at 3 p.m., we have the Skyjacks live show. That's going to have me, Nathan Blades, and very likely Tyler Davis, and probably Johnny O'Mara, but not Liz Anderson. Then Saturday at 8:30 p.m., we have the Ultimate RPG Dungeon Meister Pub Trivia Show, where Jeff, John, and I are going to be doing RPG trivia with tons of prizes from our publishing catalogs. All of that is bookable through the Gen Con website. I am so excited to see all of you in 2025.